There are places that seem to exist outside of time, grand, imposing structures that hold the echoes of every guest who has ever walked their halls. But few have captured the public imagination and the internet's obsession quite like a remote hotel nestled in the Colorado Rockies. This is the Stanley Hotel, an elegant historic landmark on its own, but known to the world for something far more unsettling. It is the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. For decades, that fact alone was enough to draw tourists and horror fans. But in the age of the internet, the Stanley has transformed into something else, a living laboratory for paranormal investigation, documented and dissected by thousands of digital ghost hunters. Its hallways are now some of the most analysed in the world, with every shadow and sound captured, uploaded and debated. Welcome back to Vanishing Threads. Today we're opening the Stanley Hotel's digital files. We'll explore the history, the legends, and the single night that changed everything. But then we'll go deeper to ask a more critical question. How did a historic hotel become the internet's most famous haunted house? And what do the countless gigabytes of online evidence really tell us? To understand the Stanley's modern myth, you have to go back to its beginning. It was opened in 1909 by Freelan Oscar Stanley. Stanley wasn't just a hotelier, he was a brilliant inventor, co-creator of the Stanley Steamer, the most famous steam-powered car in the world. After a late-in-life diagnosis of tuberculosis, his doctor advised him to spend the summer in the Rocky Mountains. Stanley and his wife Flora fell in love with Estes Park. He didn't just recover, he thrived. His vision for the hotel was not merely a rustic lodge, but a beacon of East Coast sophistication in the rugged West. It was a place of science and leisure, complete with electric lights, telephones, and a fleet of Stanley steamers to bring guests from the nearest train station. It was a health retreat for the wealthy, a symbol of progress, not a place of shadows. For decades, it was just that, a high-end seasonal resort. But by the 1970s, the hotel's glory had faded. It was losing money and had fallen into a state of disrepair. And then, on a cold night in late 1974, a young writer and his wife checked in. The hotel was about to close for the winter, and they were the only guests. The writer was Stephen King. He and his wife Tabitha ate alone in the grand dining room, the chairs on all the other tables stacked, while pre-recorded orchestral music echoed through the empty space. Later that night, King had a nightmare. He dreamed his 3-year-old son was being chased through the hotel's long, empty corridors by a writhing fire hose. He woke up in a sweat, lit a cigarette, and as he stared out the window into the dark mountains, the skeleton of The Shining was born. That one night, and the blockbuster novel it inspired, would forever link the Stanley Hotel with the paranormal in the public consciousness. But the stories, as it turns out, had been there all along. Long before Stephen King's visit, the staff and a handful of guests had whispered about strange occurrences. The most famous story centers on room 217, the very room King stayed in. In 1911, a gas leak caused a massive explosion in that room. The head chambermaid, a Mrs. Elizabeth Wilson, was caught in the blast. Miraculously, she survived and continued to work at the hotel until her death. But according to legend, she never truly left. Guests in room 217 have reported their luggage being mysteriously unpacked, lights turning on and off, and a cold presence settling between unmarried couples in the bed, a spectral enforcer of old-fashioned morality. Then there are the founders themselves. F.O. Stanley and his wife Flora are said to still preside over their hotel. Flora's antique piano can allegedly be heard playing in the concert hall late at night, its keys moving on their own. F.O. has been spotted in the lobby and the billiard room, a ghostly proprietor keeping watch. But the 4th floor is where the legends become most concentrated. The entire floor is said to be the most active, with the sounds of children laughing and running in the halls. This has led to several rooms on this floor gaining their own specific and unsettling reputations. Take room 401. It's said to be haunted by a male spirit and is famous for its closet. During the ghost hunters' investigation, The team claimed the locked closet door opened on its own. Other guests, particularly women, have reported feeling an unwelcome touch when standing near it. In room 407, the activity is more mischievous. The ghost here is said to turn lights on and off, and some guests have reported the bizarre sensation of being tucked into bed by an unseen force. And then there's room 428, home to the ghost of a friendly cowboy. Guests have reported seeing his shadow standing at the foot of the bed, and some women have even claimed to feel a phantom kiss on their forehead. Stranger still are the sounds of footsteps and moving furniture from the ceiling above, a physical impossibility given the steep slope of the roof directly over the room. For years, these were local legends, passed from staff to the most curious guests. But then, technology gave them a global stage. In 2006, the Sci-Fi Channel's hit show, Ghost Hunters, aired their investigation of the Stanley. The episode was a sensation. The team captured what they claimed was a table lifting off the floor, closet doors opening on their own, and disembodied voices. This was the turning point. The Stanley was no longer just the hotel from The Shining. It was now a verified haunted location in the eyes of millions. The age of digital ghost hunting at the Stanley had begun. A flood of paranormal investigators and amateur sleuths descended on the hotel, armed with cameras, EMF meters, and audio recorders. YouTube, forums, and blogs became repositories for thousands of pieces of evidence. The Stanley's reputation became a feedback loop. People went there expecting to see a ghost, and because of that expectation, they often did. But what does the evidence really show? Let's start with the most common forms of digital proof: photos and audio recordings. The internet is filled with images of orbs at the Stanley. Floating balls of light claim to be spirit energy. In reality, these are almost always caused by dust, pollen, or moisture either on or near the camera lens, illuminated by the flash. It's a photographic artifact, not an apparition. Then there are the EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena. These are the faint, whispery voices that investigators claim to capture in audio recordings. This is where a psychological principle called pareidolia comes into play. Pareidolia is the human brain's tendency to find significant patterns in random noise. It's why we see faces in clouds or hear words in static. When you're listening intently for a ghostly voice in hours of white noise, your brain is highly likely to create one for you. Beyond the digital evidence, many of the physical sensations can also be explained. Take the feeling of dread, anxiety, or seeing things out of the corner of your eye. Scientists have studied a phenomenon called infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing. Infrasound can be generated by wind, storms, or even old pipes and machinery. Research, like that pioneered by engineer Vic Tandy in the 1980s, has shown that exposure to these frequencies can cause a range of physiological effects, including feelings of fear, shivers down the spine, and even optical illusions as the sound waves vibrate the human eyeball. Old, large, and windy buildings like the Stanley are perfect generators for infrasound. Finally, there's the power of suggestion and confirmation bias. When you are told a place is haunted, you are primed to interpret every ambiguous stimulus, a creak, a cold spot, a flicker of light, as paranormal. The sheer volume of online content from the Stanley reinforces this bias before a guest even checks in. They arrive wanting to be part of the story, and their brain helps them do it. The historical claims also warrant scrutiny. While the 1911 explosion in room 217 is a documented fact, there is no historical record of Elizabeth Wilson's spirit being reported before the hotel's haunted reputation was commercialized. The stories have grown with the fame. The Stanley Hotel is a fascinating case study in how a legend is built and amplified in the digital age. It's a story with a factual core, a historic hotel, and a famous author's terrifying night of inspiration. But its modern identity has been crowdsourced by the internet. It exists now in two realms: the physical space of wood and stone in Estes Park, and the digital space of endless video clips, forum posts, and 5-star reviews of its ghosts. The digital version is a powerful engine, turning folklore into a destination and personal feelings into verifiable fact for millions of believers. The question isn't whether the Stanley Hotel is truly haunted. The more interesting question is why we are so compelled to prove that it is. It shows us that a good story, especially one that brushes up against the unknown, is one of the most powerful forces there is. And in the 21st century, a good story, backed by a mountain of digital evidence, can make a place immortal. So, what is the final truth of the Stanley Hotel? Perhaps the answer isn't found in an EMF meter or a scientific journal, but in our fundamental need for mystery. In a world that feels increasingly mapped and explained, places like the Stanley offer a rare connection to the unknown. Its ghosts, whether real or imagined, serve a purpose. They allow us to stand in a place where history feels tangible, and to entertain the idea that some questions might not have simple answers. The digital files will continue to grow, and the debate will rage on in comment sections and forums, but the enduring power of the Stanley lies not in proving its hauntings, but in what our desire to do so says about us. It reveals a collective longing to believe that there are still stories waiting to be discovered, just beyond the veil of our understanding. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, stay curious, stay safe,